Hello, and welcome to the Gallimaufry, a hodgepodge history podcast. My name is Will, and I am joined today, as ever, in the lovely basement by my good friend Nick.
It's been that long.
It's been that long. It's been a while, hasn't it, since we've been...
It is. Happy New Year, everyone, by the way. Happy New Year. I hope you had a cracking Christmas.
Yeah.
And got everything you ever desired.
Yeah, did you get everything you desired?
Well, you gave me some bread gin.
Yeah, bread gin.
Yeah, which I'm sure
Which
I
is,
will enjoy.
It's a meal in one, isn't it? Bread gin.
It's a million one.
That's all your staples.
And I gave you a torture book on cats.
You did. I don't own a cat, but I'm sure.
Yes, you do. It's if you live together, you own the cat.
I do live with a cat, yeah. But I claim no responsibility for him.
It's not like it's the landlord. It's you are its daddy.
When he'd like to think he's the landlord, probably.
He probably would.
Yeah. But enough of that. Teach me about what today's topic is about.
Do you not have a tissue? You could just... It's just really... It's like that big blob of chocolate that's nestled in your screen is really starting to bother me.
Sorry, is it offending you?
I'm not trying to embarrass you.
No.
Although I am slightly.
It is filthy. Sorry, it's my work laptop, so...
Oh, that's even worse. It's not even yours.
Yeah.
I'm never lending you anything again. Anyway, yeah. Topic of the... I'll just try and not look at you.
Yeah, just try not to look at it. Push on through.
Anyway, we're going to delve into the wonderful world of a mysterious, jovial, slightly sexy sometimes, London language.
Exactly. We're going to be going all the way to the wrong side of town and discussing the Cockneys of East London.
Yes, or in Cockney, we're going to get a Piccadilly today.
Oh dear.
They don't obviously sound like me. I'm ridiculously up. I don't know where this RP accent has come from, because if you listen to either my mum or my dad, it's...
No, I think...
But anyway, we are in true Cockney style, before you give me your thoughts, which will be like daggers in my heart.
Exactly.
We're going to get a Piccadilly today, aren't we, me old China, as we delve into the wondrous world of Cockney slang.
Yeah, so if you'd love to cringe...
Oh, hang on, there's more. So hold on to your Alan Wickers for the Harry Lime of your fork and knife.
Yeah. Spoken like a true Hampshire boy there.
I was born in Guildford, I'll have you know.
Guildford, even worse.
So, but you were born in the same You were born in Surrey as well. You were born in Frimley.
Oh, yeah. Not many Cockneys in Frimley, though.
Actually, there are. You'd be surprised.
The Cockneys of Frimley.
Cockney exodus from London, which we'll discuss later, has them all around London now. Not just. Well, actually, rarely in London anymore.
They do spread, don't they?
I'm not sure that makes them sound like a virus.
No, they are lovely people, as we're going to find out, and it is a very sort of vibrant, interesting culture which has formed within the Cockney communities over the years.
It is. It's a wondrously vibrant culture as well. So it's probably a good thing we start with what a Cockney is. So the dictionary definition says it's an Australian fish, which I thought was a bit weird. But the Cockney we're dealing with, as we all know and love, is a sort of group of Londoners specific to a region, specifically a native of East London, traditionally one born within the sound of the Bow Bells. Now, for many, a true Londoner is also a true Cockney. Not every Londoner is a Cockney because of that locational situation that they have. It's a bit strange, really, because they're not really an ethnicity, they're not really hereditary, and it's not really a religious grouping. It's purely an auditory allocation, which is a bit strange in itself. But then again, I suppose in the same way, that's kind of like nationality, how it works.
Yeah. So are you saying once a Cockney, always a Cockney?
That's right, mate. Always.
Yeah. Someone put your
That wasn't
on.
too bad, actually.
Yeah. You're going a bit Phil Mitchell there.
That's what I was going for. Danny Dyer as well.
Oh, Danny Dyer.
What?
Yeah, sad news about Mick Carter, isn't it?
Mick Carter.
He's been Danny Dyer's character's been written out of EastEnders. Do you not watch EastEnders?
I'm afraid I...
What were you doing on Christmas Day?
I don't think I watched TV on Christmas Day. I ate a lot of food and played a quiz.
Yeah, my family, no interest at all in the King's Speech, but EastEnders, all over that.
But coming back to London, that glorious metropolitan garbage dumpster that we all know and love, let's take a look at that location itself. So why specifically is it the sound of the Bow Bells?
The Bow Bells themselves are contained within the tower of a church called St Mary le Bow, which is in Cheapside. While there's been a church on the site for almost 1,000 years, it hasn't always actually been the same building. The original was built in 1080 by the Normans, though evidence remains of an earlier building dating back to Saxon times. The first iteration was destroyed in 1666 during the Great Fire of London. While the tower, which contained the bells, was initially spared from destruction, the fire severely compromised its stability, and it was later demolished despite efforts to repair it. But in 1680, a few years later, the replacement church, which was designed by Sir Christopher Wren, was completed at a cost of £15,000, which is about 2.3 million in today's money. The new tower, which was built from Portland stone, was the second highest of any of Wren's churches, only surpassed by a little church called St Paul's. I don't know if you've heard of that one. The Wren-designed church continued to stand throughout the centuries, receiving only minor repairs and alterations over the years, until the 10th of May 1941, when it was destroyed on the final night of the Blitz. It's a bit of a bugger, isn't it? Made it all the way through the Blitz and was destroyed on the final night. While Cockneys are generally considered to come from the East End of London, the sound of the bells could historically be expected to travel as far as 6 miles to the east, 4 miles to the west, 5 miles to the north, and 3 miles to the south. Which doesn't sound like much, but in London, that's quite a big area.
It is. In fact, actually, the original earshot covered parts of Westminster, Camden, Islington, Tower Hamlets, and most of Hackney, as well as bits of Waltham Forest, Newham, and a slice of Southwark.
Yeah, I mean, according to legend, Dick Whittington was said to have heard the bells ringing from Highgate, which is way up in North London.
And you've always said you wanted to live in Highgate, so you know.
I know, so well, it wouldn't make me a Cockney, would it?
They make your children Cockneys.
Not unless...
well, actually, technically not now.
Yeah.
Because whilst that area was huge, the growing expanse of London, the ever-growing pollution and the tall buildings have rendered that soundscape completely pointless.
Yeah.
Because now the area where you can actually hear the Bow Bells is so small, it no longer contains a hospital with a working maternity ward.
Right.
So there are no Cockneys born within the sound of the Bow Bells anymore.
Yeah, it's also, the area has become much less residential and more focused on businesses. And most babies are not born inside, shops. So even children being born at home in the area are unlikely to be Cockneys under the strict definition these days.
We probably should put out a PSA. Please don't drive your pregnant partner to the Bow Bells church just to give birth in a car so they can be a Cockney.
I mean, if you owned that church, you could have a good business of, are you pregnant? Do you want to come and give birth in our church? You can definitely hear the bells.
So, but just specifically around the area, why the Cockneys were there in the first place, or rather these communities, was trade and heavy industry had boomed under the Victorian era, particularly in 1827 with the opening of the new St Catherine docks. And the need for large numbers of dock workers was apparent. So obviously it was quite appealing to lots of people who lived in that area to start working in the docks, but also there were lots of immigrant communities that had been flooding in, not just then and there, but over the years. You had the Huguenots, you had Jewish communities, you had Russian and Polish ethnicities coming in, also fleeing religious and political persecution. So it was a real melting pot, East London, of different people. And you can see that today in some of the street names reflected around Spitalfields and other places in Cheapside. And it still is today. It's just a different generation of communities, sort of ever changing.
Yeah.
Just to portray life for these Cockneys, for these East Londoners or Londoners. Charles Booth produced his extensive survey. You know who Charles Booth is, don't you?
Oh yeah, Charlie Booth. Yeah.
What do you like most about Charles Booth?
I like those comic strips he was in with the little dog.
That's Charlie
Was
Brown.
he a beagle?
That's Charlie. Charles Booth. Anyway, famous Victorian chronicler of London, produced an extensive survey looking at and categorising different areas of London. So, and he categorised East London as having one of the highest populations of chronically poor. In fact, 13% of the East End population was chronically poor, people who just couldn't afford to even live, which is just horrific. So out of this community of hard-working, chronically poor people came this language of Cockney, of this jovial, quite roguish and hilarious, tongue-in-cheek form of communication. Perhaps it kept this sort of jovial nature because of the state of affairs they were living in, kind of in a way like gallows humour. There are a number of different theories about why the language itself sprung up. But obviously, at the end of the day, any slang language that springs up is a way of hiding your true intent from someone else. And we'll delve into that into a little bit, just about where Cockney slang sprung from. But first, let's look at the actual word itself. Like, Cockney is such a strange word.
It is a strange word, and one which there are several theories on as to how it came about and how it came to describe a group of people who may or may not come from the East End of London, depending on who you ask. The earliest known use of the term Cockney is a poem from 1362 called Piers Plowman, where it is used to refer to a small misshapen egg, coming from the words cocken and a to mean a cock's egg.
There was an alternative use first recorded by Chaucer, actually, and defined later on essentially as, I mean, I've written here, spoiled mama's boy.
Right.
But it's basically a slightly effeminate, lazy person who just doesn't do much to further their life and just coasts by. And a lot of country people revelled in applying this to city folk, because you know what country people are like, oh, we're hard working, we get up at 4 a.m. and mow the lawns and plough the fields.
Yeah.
Probably not mow the lawns. That's probably my city folk effeminate.
Yeah, different kind of
Cockney nature coming out there.
You're thinking of the landed gentry.
I am, yes. But yeah, they basically thought city folk were lazy and pointless. And probably still do today. So they began applying this to city folk, and eventually, like with any insult, people start wearing it as a badge of honour.
Yeah, considering that they were applying this to desperately poor working class people.
Yeah,
they probably had to see the funny side of it.
And I think but initially it applied to all city folk, but then it's gradually just become to be applied to this, I would say, initially small community, but it was actually quite a large community when you think about it. The radius of where the Bow Bells was and the amount of workers there. But the Cockneys probably picked it up because their life was so harsh and because they were working so hard. They probably thought, actually, you know what, let's wear it as a badge because this is our life. We work hard. There's actually an interesting article written by a Cockney turned American named Reginald Bolton, or to use his full name, Reginald Pelham Bolton. And he basically wrote a sort of style guide for Americans on what it meant to be a Cockney.
Right.
He surmised that the word came from medieval rhyme, which, and this will be butchered quite badly. Fur in sea, be west spanny is a London Cockney. I don't know what that means. No. He doesn't actually offer a translation of that. But he does say, over time, the connection between luxury and effeminacy came to be applied specifically to Cockneys.
Yeah.
Because of the same reasons.
It does seem a bit unfair applying it, the notoriously lazy, effeminate dock workers of East London.
Just bringing it back to the origins of where Cockney, the language itself, started, the Oxford English Dictionary's first recorded use of Cockney language is dated as 1776. But it's thought to be actually a bit older than that. But considerations around it at this point, it wasn't a language as say, in the way we think of it as the rhyming slang. It was more of an accent of pronunciation, which carries through to the modern day. Precursors are said to exist in terms of secret language, like Cockney, in the form of a language called Thieves' Cant, supposedly developed in the 16th century as a sort of secret parlance that largely used English but replaced certain words. For example, shoulder tap meant backstab, or visiting the neighbours meant burgling. So it wasn't based on rhyming, it was based on just substitution.
Oh, okay.
But there are debates about whether this is actually a real language used or just developed by authors at the time for a bit of salacious publicity.
This is quite similar to sort of Polari, isn't it?
I don't know what that is, actually.
Polari is an interesting thing, which I haven't actually done a whole lot of research into, but I did come across it.
That's what I love to hear.
And it was essentially sort of mid-20th century slang, a little bit like Cockney, but it was picked up by the gay community during a time when it was basically illegal to be gay and to be practicing gay acts.
Practice.
I can't think of the right phrase for it.
Like they're a doctor.
Yeah, but basically it was, the law frowned upon homosexuality. So
it frowned upon homosexual people being homosexual people.
Yeah.
They couldn't live their lives how they wanted to.
No, so gay communities created this this sort of inner language called, it was sort of adapted from, I think it was an old Thieves' Cant called Polari. And it was a lot of modern words we use today are actually derived from things like this. Like one that comes to mind is the word naff, which is just a boring man. He's a naff. That comes from Polari. I'm not doing it any justice here because I haven't properly. But
it sounds absolutely fascinating. But that's the beauty of of language, and
Yeah.
specifically with the English language, as my Portuguese friend ever he says to point out, your language is a bunch of idioms and play on words, and it's all pointless. Like, none of what you say actually means what you say.
English is kind of a mess, really.
Um,
But yeah, Polari, it was also picked up by the theatre, which meant it also found its way into TV. So Frank Spencer often came up with Polari terms in. Some others do have them. Was that Frank Spencer?
It was. You're the one who went, "Ooh, Betty."
Yeah.
That's that's Frank Spencer.
And in the Carry On films, who was the one?
Kenneth Williams.
Kenneth Williams. He would. So,
Sure. I can't do Kenneth Williams.
So these little phrases. That's it. Perfect. Oh, matron.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, that's. I couldn't think of the catchphrase.
Yeah.
The most famous catchphrase.
His famous one. But it allowed these phrases to enter common. A bit like with Cockney, how through the media. We'll come into this later, but several Cockney phrases have found mainstream use.
Barbara Windsor was in the Carry On films, as was Sid James, who
Yeah.
had that famous sort of Cockney-esque villain's sort of aura to him.
Sid James was great. He was like he was born to play the dirty old man. Wasn't he?
He was
Yeah.
a dirty old man. But that's a whole nother story.
My uncle, he was called James when he was born.
You can say your uncle was a dirty old man.
Well, when he was born, my grandparents decided that he looked like Sid James. Sid James was an old, dirty old man at this point. This was the 60s. So it wasn't even young Sid James.
It's like Leslie Nielsen. You just can't imagine Sid James being young.
Sticking on the topic of Cockneys,
Yeah.
the older steptoe. What was he called? Wilfred, was he? No, Wilfred Bramble. Was that? I think that was his name.
I think it was Bramble. Because he was actually, funny enough, is another random tangent. Only Fools and Horses, which we will actually talk about as well, being an example of how Cockney entered into mainstream culture. You know the granddad in that?
Yeah.
So the father in Steptoe Son was considered for the role of granddad in the original series, but John Sullivan, the writer, thought he was too recognisable. He was too connected to the role of Steptoe.
Yeah.
So he would overshadow the role of. It wouldn't work out in the series. He thought there was too much baggage with that.
Yeah.
But he was considered for it, which is quite interesting.
Also, on the topic of what we're talking about just now, Wilfred Steptoe was Wilfred Bramble. Wilfred Bramble was he was a gay man in the 1950s and 60s when homosexuality was illegal. Also, apparently, didn't get on with the guy who played his son. I think he was called Harry Corbett. Famously had fights. But
no, I can see that. But a lot of great comedic. I mean, my favourite. Is Chris Barry and Craig Charles, who hated each other for like, I don't know if they ever made up, but they hated each other for like quite a few of the original series of Red Dwarf.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that animosity between them was probably real.
The two guys who wrote Red Dwarf fell out as well, didn't they?
Yeah,
That's why Red Dwarf suddenly stopped being good in about Series 7.
I mean, to be fair, to reach Series 7,
Yeah.
it'd still be knocking out great episodes.
But we've moved from Cockneys to Scousers now.
Yeah, and we've also just moved into TV.
Yeah.
It's just a far more
Let's just do a TV
a
podcast.
topic we know far more about. Anyway, going back in time, there's a bit of debate about the origins of why Cockney developed. But having hopefully painted the picture of this area of depravity. Sorry, not depravity. I'm sure there were depraved things going on. This area of
These depraved people.
There's depravity everywhere. Like you go to Kensington, you just know there's some sort of weird sex parties happening with whips and bags.
All that business with the eels. Something weird's going on there.
Exactly. But anyway, this impoverished is the word I was
impoverished.
For.
That's
although it was routinely described as depraved by commentators at the time, which is why that slipped into my parlance. Anyway, because of the nature of life where they lived, it obviously was quite a lawless community, and as such, the arrival of law enforcement was never really appreciated. So the development of the language arose from conflicts between supposedly criminals in the area, but also costermongers. Now, costermonger is a word we don't really use anymore. It basically means like street vendor, fruit seller mainly. And they were very much a believer in street justice. And, if you wrong me, I wrong you. Eye for an eye type thing.
Sounds a bit like the mafia
in
America.
They're quite interesting people, costermongers themselves. You mainly found them in places like Covent Garden, or the original Covent Garden before it became New Covent Garden, Billingsgate, any place with a market, really. and on every street corner. And they were very territorial and would like to administer justice themselves, and they didn't like other people coming along and telling them what to do, which is what happened during the Victorian era, because you have the development of what would eventually become the Metropolitan Police.
These were the Del Boys of their time, were they?
These were no income tax, no VAT.
Yeah.
I'll stab you in the eye if you stab me.
The precursors of the guy with the fruit stand.
Yes.
2 for a pound.
But actually, there were many strange and incredibly difficult professions in London, and we only know this because of Henry Mayhew's incredible recording as he went out into London and just talked to real people, which was probably one of the first examples of like actual proper social history where someone decided, actually, I'm not just going to look at these people, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to talk to them. And I encourage you to read his book about London life, because there's some absolutely eye-opening interviews with people. And there are loads of different professions, like rag and bone gatherers, which are pretty self-evident.
Steptoe and Son again.
Yeah. Cigar end finders, who are basically people who hunted for rubbish on the street to sell, anything they could find.
God, that's a grift, isn't it?
Yeah. Mudlarks, which was mostly old women and children who basically scavenged in the mud and sewage of the Thames for anything they could sell.
Still, there's a thriving mudlarking community in London. It's more of a hobby now, though.
Yeah, it's not your life, it's
No.
not your life depends on it anymore. Crossing sweepers, who would keep the streets clear of mud and dung of the horses so that rich people wouldn't get dirty.
Right.
So there are all these different professions, and costermongers are basically like the top of this pyramid of lowliness, if you will. They're like who were seen as the lower forms of society because they had a nice, steady profession, and they were sort of had their eyes on the streets, and they were kind of at the top of this. So it kind of makes sense they didn't want other people coming in and telling them what to do. So back in the 1700s, policing the community was sort of pay the meanest sort of mother to look after things. And when I say mother, I don't mean as in birther of children.
Right.
I mean, that's a mean-looking mother.
Okay.
Basically, private police force. And that isn't until a London magistrate, those magistrates always coming in and messing with the will of the people,
Always magistrating.
called Henry Fielding, put together the first professional police force, which was known as...
Is it like it's like the something street runners, isn't it?
You were nearly there.
I want to say the Bow Street runners.
It is the Bow Street. Ding, ding. If I had a bell, I'd ring it. In fact, I'll tell you what, I'll pause to add sound effect.
Yay.
The group originally was only comprised of 6 paid constables who were trained and paid for by the government whilst also receiving a reward every time they apprehended a suspect.
Oh, that's nice.
Which obviously gave them incentive to apprehend suspects.
Yeah, they found a lot of suspects.
So, not necessarily a great thing. With the success of the scheme growing, by the early 1800s, there were thought to be almost 70 of these constables patrolling, dangerous word, constable, patrolling the streets of London, much to the annoyance of costermongers and, of course, petty criminals and gangs. The eventual disbanding of the Bow Street Runners happened in 1839, but they only disbanded because it was predicated by the creation of the Metropolitan Police nearly 10 years earlier in 1829. Something spearheaded by then Home Secretary Robert Peel in 1822, who would later go on to be Prime Minister in 1838. He expanded the force to cover the entire Greater London area, and they soon became known as Bobbies.
Oh, because of Robert Peel.
After Robert Peel.
Yeah.
Rob Bob. So these Bobbies on the beats patrolling the streets became a force that hindered costermongers and daily life in the East End, so ergo the rise of slang.
So it wasn't just the police who looked at Cockneys as a potential source of trouble. Despite their jovial reputation today, society's attitudes to Cockneys was not always necessarily positive. In the 1859 Dictionary of Modern Slang, Cant and Vulgar Words, its author John Houghton wrote of them as having low habits, general improvidence, love of gambling, total want of education, disregard for lawful marriage, and their use of a peculiar slang language. Charles Dickens largely painted Cockneys as villains. I'm not sure if you remember Bill Sikes.
Oliver?
Yep.
Oliver Twist.
But after all, only the good spoke proper English. By the century's end, a new school of Cockney novelists, notably William Petridge, Edward Pugh and Arthur Morrison, had emerged. And it is their Cockneyisms that are far more like what one might hear today. By contrast, Reginald Bolton, a former Cockney turned American, said, perhaps because he was one of them, "I have lived with him, worked alongside of him, and have learned to appreciate his geniality, shrewd humour, briskness of conception and repartee, his blundering good nature and love of practical joking, in all of which I see the traces of inherited peculiarities.
He was actually an engineer, so he was actually quite well read.
I suppose if you said it in a Cockney accent, it might sound better.
Yes, but I'd imagine he would, because he lived in America for quite a while.
Yeah.
He would have had probably one of those weird accents.
Oh, yeah, those transatlantic ones, like the token British character in a 90s American sitcom, or like Daphne's family in Friends when they not in Friends, in Frasier, when they come to visit, and they all have different accents.
They do, like, because it's an Italian American actor playing her brother, isn't it? And he's got mate, like a proper Cockney London accent, but like her dad's or her mother's like from the north. It's like, oh, Daphne.
Yeah, and she's meant to be from Manchester, and she had a brother who was Richard E. Grant, and another one who was that guy who played Hagrid. Wasn't he one of them? Robbie Coltrane. Yeah,
got there.
I want to say he might have been one. They were an odd family in that they all had different accents. They all look completely different.
Again, we've delved into TV.
Yeah.
It's like a reoccurring theme.
And you were like, is this part of the joke? Or have the producers overlooked something here?
I think they just thought, yeah, let's do this as a joke. Because actually, the guy who played his dad, John...
Yeah. Oh, John Mahoney.
John Mahoney.
Yeah.
He was actually English. He's an English actor.
Was he?
Yeah. So he's actually he lived in America for quite a few years. He moved over to America to work, but he's born in England.
See, he did a good American accent. I would never question that. But then I'm not American, so maybe I'm less picky.
But I reckon he would have been like, yeah, this is quite funny. Because anybody's English, and we're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Anyway, going back to moving away from I suppose slightly contemporary popular culture,
30-year-old sitcoms based in Seattle.
Going to culture of the day in Victorian era, what helped cement Cockney into the minds of the general population and sort of give it this lovability was the music hall. Now, the music hall was I guess to compare it to a modern day equivalent would be like Ant and Dec's Saturday Night Takeaway, or maybe those variety shows used to get in like the 60s and the 70s, like Morecambe Wise, where they'd have like a singing act or something.
Oh, or like the working men's clubs from up north in the 70s and 60s. And
yeah, basically light entertainment which the audience could participate in and have a bit of a laugh.
Cockney Phoenix Nights.
Yeah, Phoenix Nights. That sort of follows the music hall tradition. So these weren't specifically a London thing, but they started in London. So you had the very first music hall. I believe it was in 1852, and that was called the Canterbury Hall, and that was in Lambeth. Whee, big up Lambeth!
Yay Lambeth!
So you had lots of famous London performers coming on and sort of spreading the use of Cockney and singing songs. You remember the classic Daisy, Daisy.
Dude, that's a Cockney music hall song.
Give me your answer, do.
I know.
Well, it's Cockney because no one ever pronounces the H in half, as we'll go into in a minute. But I'm off crazy rather than half crazy.
There's that other one goes, and really 8-4 I am. And that was Harry Champion, who was a famous Cockney musical star.
Exactly, Champion was one of the great ones. But as I was about to say, they weren't all Cockney. George Laban, one of the most famous ones, had the character of Champagne Charlie.
Yeah,
who basically went on stage and drunk champagne.
That's a great act.
It's a great act for him. He died.
Wish we could do that.
He did die penniless and from liver failure.
All that champagne that costs, doesn't it?
It does. But yes, so music halls were a way of sort of propagating Cockney as a sort of art form in a way, through the good old sing-song. And they became a staple of working-class culture for decades and decades. And in fact, for over 100 years, the music hall was the most popular form of entertainment. Many songs originating at the time that are strongly associated with Cockneys in London, particularly Cockney culture. The Knees Up song, Any Old Iron, Boiled Beef and Carrots. I mean, we all sing these around the table.
Maybe it's because I'm a Londoner.
Knees Up, Mother Brown. We all know that expression.
Yes, say it often.
Which later actually became the Sherman Brothers' inspiration for Step in Time, which is sung by the Chimney Sweeps in which famous book/musical/Disney film?
And those were Mary Poppins, which had a very notoriously bad Cockney...
Oh, yes, the old Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah.
There's your mother.
I mean, to be fair to him, he wasn't a Cockney. He was trying his best.
He wasn't trying his best. He just gave up.
He was much better at being a sort of crime-solving doctor. Was that what he went on to do?
Oh, Diagnosis Murder.
Yeah.
He was brilliant. Well, he was playing an American in that. So,
yeah.
Is he still alive? He must be well old by now.
He is well old. Yeah. He's one of those guys. He's a bit like Mel Brooks.
Is he? No.
He's still alive.
Whoa.
Mel Brooks. Yeah, and he's one of the ones you go, oh no, he must be dead, and you look him up and go, wow, nope, still going.
That must be when you get to that age. It must be so infuriating when people say, "I thought you were dead." Nope, still here. You're no longer in the will. Anyway, and so these music halls had a massive role in cementing them in popular culture. And as we've talked about, some of the things we've mentioned, you have Step Turns, Son, you have Only Fools, which translated onto TV and sort of became ingrained in our culture.
Yeah.
So it's one of those weird things which sort of develop from a slightly nefarious purpose, but because of its nature, it's something we love to replicate, we love to hear, and it's lots of the words we probably use today. Like I was about to say, they haven't croaked it yet around Mel Brooks, and that would have come from Cockney as well.
It's actually been glamorised from what was something that was associated with impoverished working class, lazy city dwellers. There was a recent survey which basically asked people to rank regional English dialects and accents by how cool they thought they were, and it was the 4th coolest accent.
Which is weird because it's both sort of a slang language and a sort of accent.
Yeah.
But I would largely say what I consider a Cockney accent to be Essex at the same time, because lots of Cockneys moved to Essex and people don't like Essex accents.
I think it's
been watered down.
Yeah. But you look at things like Lock, Stock, or like Michael Caine in The Italian Job. It's glamorised Cockney.
It is, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And actually, let's come on to how Cockneys speak and what, because it's not just a language. It's, as we said, it started out being recorded as an accent and pronunciation, and it very much continued to do so.
Yeah.
But just before we do that, one more thing: if you do fancy looking around at a genuine music hall, there's one called Wilton's, which is located in Shadwell. And it's still going. It's still a performance venue, not a musical as such, but it's kind of like a living history museum as well. That you can walk in, you can see some of the original design motifs and things. It's well worth the visit.
Do they roll out the barrel?
Oh, not anymore.
Do they get Mother Brown's knees up? Do they talk about what a lovely bunch of coconuts they have?
I'm just going to say yes to everything.
Yes.
Yeah. Just to end this conversation.
I like the Cockney songs. They're just ridiculous, aren't they?
Prior to recording this, you said you did not like the music hall at all. You said it was a pointless thing.
I know, but then I remember the coconut song. Classic. Anyway, so when a community forms, as the Cockney community did, it's very common for a particular accent to develop, as was the case here. As we mentioned, over the centuries, the Cockney accent has become synonymous with working class people from the East End of London. However, its influence can be found not only throughout London, but across the world. As with most accents, Cockney has several different quirks which make it what it is, the sort of the personality of the Cockney accent. So shall we just go through a few of those? So we have something called the voiceless TH sounds, such as think and through and thorough. That it's normally spelled with TH.
Ooh, do that again. Oh, lovely.
It's like ASMR, isn't it, for the listeners there? In Cockney tradition, it is normal to replace the th sound with a f sound. So think becomes think, through becomes through, three becomes free, and author becomes author. It's the sort of thing that would make your middle-class grandmother cringe if you had a middle-class grandmother. I think yours were Londoners, weren't they?
Yeah, they were.
No, mine was a Londoner as well. Someone's middle-class grandmother would be cringing right now. We also have the voiced th, like the th in brother, which normally gets replaced with a v. So brother becomes brother, mother becomes mother, and another becomes another.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm completely following you.
Okay. Then we also have the famous glottal stop. So bottle becomes bottle, cottage becomes cottage, out becomes out.
I mean, out just sounded the same. So
I know.
Just put some welly into it.
But the glottal stop actually it extends to K and P sounds as well in some cases. So upper can become utter, blackboard can become blackboard, clapham can become clapham.
Indeed. And actually words with the OW sound, the owl, or they actually become double A's with a slight drawl as well.
It's almost like a sort of West Country accent in some ways.
Yeah, and then for some reason the H mysteriously disappears in lots of words.
Yeah.
And then reappears in words where they don't have a H.
This is another famous trait, isn't it? The dropping of H's. So hat becomes at, Hounslow becomes Hounslow. Not that you go to Hounslow. If you're
Harry
East
becomes
Ender.
Harry.
Harry. Yeah. But yeah, those are the main ones. There are a few other quirks of the Cockney dialect, but we'd be here all day if we went over everything.
Yeah, just on the H thing, where the H suddenly becomes pronounced. So as you said, like healing, strangely would be pronounced Ealing.
Like
But Ealing, the
Yeah.
place, which sounds exactly like the way they say healing,
Yeah.
would be pronounced healing. It's a bit like if you ever... my mum's from Clapham Common, so
Yeah.
she's got a really like London accent. So whenever she picked up the phone as a kid, it would be go from, "Oh, you horrible little get away from that." It'd be like, "Hello." She was
Yeah.
sort of hyper correct. And that's basically what they're doing. It's almost like a form of hypercorrection where they're trying to compensate. They're aspiring to speak better, so they attach the H in random places.
Yeah, because I mean, historically, while Cockney is sort of, as we say, slightly glamorised these days, in the past, it was something that a lot of Cockneys would have tried to hide in general conversation. They try to take on a more received pronunciation style of accent.
Exactly, yeah.
Because you probably wouldn't get taken seriously in many areas of society if you came in with a Cockney accent.
And that's right. And just one more peculiarity is that there tended to be a sort of a flowing of sentences and words together. So you'd have a lot of meshing of words. So you'd miss out certain points of sentences or syllables or vowels even in words. So you get this clipping of words. It makes them sound almost slightly slurred and drunk, which probably leads to the drawl of like the OW into A's and A's into slightly more pronounced.
Again, it's a bit like the Southwest. Like
It is,
Cornwall,
yeah.
Devon, or Norfolk. They sort of do that as well, don't they?
But anyway, Cockney language itself. What is Cockney?
What is Cockney? Cockney as a language.
I think hopefully we've established that after about 40, God knows how long.
Yeah.
But the actual pattern of Cockney, there's no actual clear, hard and fast rule, at least from what I was reading and discovered. Basically, the pattern of Cockney is simple. You take the word, or a word that you want to disguise, and you find a rhyming equivalent, usually a couple of words, with the last one having to rhyme with the intended word, but not necessarily always. It can be a slight half rhyme or sometimes not even a rhyme at all. Then contract it to remove the rhyming word altogether. So we all know that you're my china plate.
Yeah.
Which means...
Mate.
Which means
It's
friend.
like,
Yeah.
all right, me old China.
Yeah, so you take out the plate.
Yeah.
So that's traditionally what you do. So if you have so apples and pears,
Yeah.
you actually shouldn't be saying and pears. You should be, I'm going up the apples.
Yeah.
But people obviously say the whole sentence. But that's the thing. There's no hard and fast rule. So although you should sort of shorten the word, so it is a sentence to be one word again, most people don't do that. They just say the whole sentence sometimes.
Yeah.
So trouble and strife for wife, fork and knife.
Some of them don't quite work. So things like brown bread is dead. You'd say he's brown bread, but you wouldn't say he's brown. Yeah. That might get,
Oh,
people
right.
might misunderstand.
I see what you mean now. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But usually, you take the first part of it and you use that alone rather than the bit that rhymes.
Anyway, the technical name for this creation of a rhyming slang or substitution is hemitelea.
Shall we? So we've talked about Cockney rhyming slang and the mechanics of how it works. Shall we discuss some examples of Cockney rhyming slang? Obviously, brown bread is dead.
Yes.
Apples and pears
Is stairs.
stairs up the apples.
Do we know why it's apples and pears is stairs, though? That's quite interesting.
Now, no. What is the reasoning for that one?
According to a fantastic book by Daniel Smith, which looks at Cockney rhyming slang, the reason we call apples and pears stairs is because of going back to the costermongers, who used to have fruit stalls and they'd be based in steps.
Yeah.
So they would obviously have their best produce on display on the best step at the bottom,
Yeah.
and then a sort of scaling system of quality.
Yeah, a lot of the rhyming slang does seem to come from objects and concepts and people that would have been familiar in daily life to Cockneys. So they often come from the name of celebrities or items or professions or that sort of thing. So things like, you've probably heard of the phrase having a butcher's.
Oh, yeah.
Having a butcher's, which means have a look. And that comes from the phrase butcher's hook. On a similar note, have you heard of the phrase that's a load of cobblers?
Yes.
Cobbler's alls. And that rhymes with
Fools.
balls.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was slightly more PC than the original.
Yeah, but you can think, late 19th century, early 20th century, East End, butchers and cobblers would have been a common sight on the street. And then we have things like taking the mick. That's a common phrase in English usage. Taking the mick, which means making fun of someone. And now taking the mick, that's taking the mickey. Mickey Bliss, piss, taking the piss. And Mickey Bliss was a celebrity at the time that they would have been familiar with. A more modern one, which you might know, is It's All Gone Pete Tong.
Yes, or you've been enjoying a Melvin Bragg.
Yeah.
Some of them are quite obvious in terms of where they come from. So bees and honey, meaning money. Obviously, bees are the epitome of work. Work produces money, the possession of which is sweet. So there's kind of like a nice logic to it. Others, like plates of meat for feet.
Yeah.
Is it just because? I mean, technically we are meat.
Yeah.
But it's just a bit strange. Like, why is that specifically feet?
You think with some of these, somebody was probably trying to come up with something and he saw a plate of meat and he went, oh, yeah, that rhymes with feet. Now, in some instances, these phrases have survived into modern usage. Sometimes they're a sort of fun novelty, a bit like cobblers taking the mickey, that sort of thing. Sometimes they hide slightly more obscene meanings that you wouldn't say in polite society. So that's why we have things like, we might call someone a Burke. It's a very English thing, but I think it's quite common. Calling him a Burke, that comes from Berkeley Hunt, and that rhymes with
Jeremy Hunt.
Jeremy Hunt, there we go. Which is obviously something you wouldn't say in polite society.
I guarantee Jeremy Hunt is also now a Cockney slang word for that very same
definitely.
thing.
I mean, even newsreaders are.
They're not using it as slang. They're just saying.
Yeah, they're saying it. Poor old Jeremy.
It's weird though because there are also. It's not just slang. There are substitutional phrases in the same way of the thieves' cant we were discussing earlier. There are bits of language where they don't have a slang meaning per se. Like, are you having a giraffe?
Yeah.
Which actually does kind of rhyme almost with laugh, but not really.
Yeah. Another one is we refer to the playing the Joanna, which means the piano, which doesn't really rhyme with Joanna. But if you think back to the time when that would have come about, it would be more common for people from the East End to pronounce it piana, which does rhyme with Joanna.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And slang's changed over time. But also just in the terms of substituting the name of what something is for what we were talking about, like an item, an everyday item that might be aware of. So one of the things I enjoyed looking at was, do you remember the old slang for money? Do you know how much a pony is? Or can I borrow a monkey off you?
I know a monkey is 500.
It is 500. Do you know why it's 500?
I don't know.
It's from British soldiers returning from India, where on the 500 rupee note there was a picture of a monkey. So 500 became monkey. Now, there's a similar argument for 25 being pony.
Yeah.
Some say that's the cost of a pony back then, but that's a lot of money for a pony, so most people think that isn't true. Other people think it's just like an acronym of like something else. But there's also apparently a 25 Indian note, which also features a pony on it. So no one's really sure about pony, but there's this sort of attachment of objects to things to then call them something else. Anyway, returning to bits of Cockney slang we kind of liked or enjoyed. One of my ones was Scotch mist.
Yeah. What's that?
Pissed.
Ah, yeah.
I think the connotation there is an easy one to draw. No offence to any Scottish people.
I like Khyber.
Oh, up the Khyber Pass.
Up the Khyber Pass.
Yeah, I know what that was.
Yeah, it is also that's a carry-on film, wasn't it? Carry on up the Khyber.
But again, Khyber Pass, India, army thing.
Yeah,
that would have been. Yeah.
Turkish, having a Turkish
delight fight.
Turkish bath, laugh.
Oh, right.
So if you think maybe the character from Snatch, Turkish.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if that was what they're going for. I don't know.
Could be.
My favourite one is Bristol's.
Bristol City. Oh, you disgust me.
Bristol City, the regional football team.
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
Bristol Cities. Bristol's.
We'll let the audience decide what that means themselves.
What I'm saying is the rude ones are the most fun.
They are.
Yeah.
They are a lot of fun. So Cockney has continued being updated, and TV and its culture has continued to add to that as well. We know, like Steptoe Son we've mentioned, and Only Fools. You know, like one of my favourite ones is getting the J. Edgar out, which is obviously slang for Hoover.
There's a few cases where there's been sort of misconceptions of things which have been erroneously accredited to rhyming slang. So there's a phrase to have a Barney with someone.
Oh yeah.
Or there's a Barney going on, and there's the idea is that comes from Barney Rubble, trouble, which is quite a commonly held belief. But actually, the usage of the word Barney to mean trouble predates the Flintstones by several decades. It's just been misattributed to it, and that's sort of yeah.
There are some less desirable ones, particularly if you're a celebrity in the modern day age. So do you know what a Leslie Ash is?
Is it a rude word?
It's actually a word that means something else, but in a slang context it means something completely different.
Is it gash?
It's gash. Yes.
Oh.
Another one is Sandra Bullock's.
Yeah. Could take a stab at that one, I think. Male cows, isn't it?
Yeah, bollocks.
Yep.
Which I think is a bit of a reach, to be honest. So they're not particularly.
So they're called Sandras, are they?
Basically, all the women are negative, are basically genitals, like Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah. Is that a sort of water-dwelling mammal?
It is, yes, but it doesn't mean a water-dwelling mammal.
Oh.
And one of my favourite is Grandfather Clock.
Oh, that's a classic.
Yeah, which is quite obvious when you think about it.
Yeah, get your grandfather out.
Yeah.
Get your grandfather out and have a good old J. Edgar.
Have a bit.
No, not J. Edgar.
have a bit of How's Your Father?
A J. Arthur.
How's Your Father?
Yeah. He's all right.
We could go on.
We could
for quite a while.
But rhyming slang isn't just unique to Cockneys and East London. It can actually be found in other parts of the world as well. One example is Australia, where the term pom has come to refer to an English person. The fruit, the pomegranate, would have been pronounced more akin to pomegranate, which rhymes with immigrant. So immigrants were called pomegrants, pommy, pom. And most immigrants at the time to Australia would have been English, so it came to refer to English people.
But they themselves were immigrants.
They themselves were immigrants.
So
I think it's a case of that kind of second generation.
Oh right, okay.
Immigrant kind of looking down on the first generation immigrants.
Any more words that you wanted to share?
More words? No, but on a similar note, we've spoken about Cockney rhyming slang and the Cockney people and their culture and their influence on society. So I have devised a game for you. I thought you'd be interested. I call this game
I gave you the fruit. This is my comeuppance.
Exactly. So this is a game, and I don't know if you want to come up with a little theme tune for this. It's...
Do I have to keep singing?
I'm quite enjoying it. It's Cockney or Notney. You see what I did there? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to list some people to you, and you're going to tell me, are they a Cockney or are they a Notney?
I love this already.
Okay. Right. So straight off the bat, Adele.
Yes.
Yes.
She's from Tottenham.
She's born in Tottenham.
Although technically not, according to the 2000, well, I suppose when she was born, it was like 90s. She might not be considered a true Cockney because the sound of the bow bells might have diminished.
Yeah, this is going to be a recurring issue with this game.
Basically, is the criteria, are they London born?
Every answer is going to have an asterisk with what you just said after it. But
I've already ruined your...
You've already ruined it, but 1 point. Well done. Next up, Nicholas Lyndhurst. No. He's from Emsworth in Hampshire. One of us.
Except we're from Surrey.
Okay, we're from Surrey. Okay, next up.
Second time you've forgotten where you were born.
Billy Bragg.
Yes.
Yes, Billy Bragg was from Barking.
Yes.
Okay, next up. Right, this one. Russell Brand.
No.
He is from Grays in Essex.
Oh, okay. So he's
just over the border.
He's probably like a third generation Cockney.
Yeah, he's a tricky one though, isn't he? Because, Jamie Oliver.
Oh, I know this. No, he's not.
No, he's from Clavering in Essex again.
Exactly, yeah.
Ah, okay. Here's one. Rylan Clark.
I don't know who that is.
Rylan. He's kind of like an animated Ken doll. He does a lot of presenting. He's got like he's got a perfect beard.
This isn't helping me. By rule of law averages, I'm say yes.
Yes, he's from Stepney.
Yeah, all right, okay.
All right,
yeah.
Joey Essex.
No.
He's
from Essex, isn't he?
No, he's from Suffolk.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh wow, I've got one wrong then. Oh, okay.
Okay. Right. Let's how about this one? Kate Nash.
No,
she's from Harrow. Bob Hoskins.
Yes,
from Finsbury Park. And finally, Guy Ritchie.
No, I know this one, actually.
Yeah. Where?
He's Hertfordshire.
He is. He's from Hatfield.
Yeah.
Oh.
I've got one for you. Damon Albarn.
No. I think David Albarn is like the poster child for Mockneys, which is... I don't think we've spoken about them yet. But yeah, he's your typical Mockney, isn't he, Damon Albarn? In that he's not a Cockney. He's not from the East End of London, but he kind of affects...
No, do you know where he was born?
Where's he from?
Whitechapel.
Whitechapel?
He's like the centre of East London, mate.
Oh.
Yeah.
But not
Guy
a Cockney.
Ritchie, though, made Lock, Stock, Snatch, Hertfordshire boy.
And the other one that always comes up, Mick Jagger.
Oh. I don't know anything about him. Is he supposed to be Cockney?
He kind of, yeah, he's supposed to sort of talk a bit like that.
I'm going to say yes.
No, Mick Jagger actually came from a middle-class family in Kent.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That whole persona he puts on.
See, I know nothing about Mick Jagger. I've never really seen him perform. I don't think I've ever really listened to a Rolling. It's probably gonna shock you, but I don't think I've ever listened to a Rolling Stones song all the way through.
Have you not?
No.
There's some quite good ones. Man.
I think ever since I heard American Pie first, which is basically slagging them off, and I think they've put me off.
Yeah, they were all right. Yeah, Mick Jagger. He was, by various accounts, one of the original people to be referred to as a Mockney, as somebody who, as Cockney culture and language and accent became glamorous and more fashionable, people from outside of that region or from middle-class backgrounds, as is in the case with Mick Jagger, affected that voice to give themselves that kind of glamorous working-class East End sort of feel.
Obviously, different cultures have different aspirational things, but there is this sort of culture, particularly in the middle class, to sort of reject being middle class and sort of maybe claim down, if that makes sense, rather than claim up as their parents did. Like my mum and my dad were always trying to be like aspire to be higher up than working class, and it feels like we've got to the stage now where middle class people are ashamed of everything they've basically been entitled to, and are now sort of claiming down, like, oh yeah, I'm from this end of London, I'm from that.
I mean, with Mick Jagger, I imagine he probably felt he would make himself more relatable.
Yeah,
that he was. But I think in some ways, coming from a privileged background perhaps undermines your achievements in the views of people from less privileged backgrounds.
It
because
does,
they go, well,
you've had to work less hard than someone who is from a less privileged background. It's always going to be the case.
You've had a bit of a head start, so, you know.
There's no denying that you work hard no matter which section of... I'm sure Prince Charles works hard, even though everything he's ever had has been given to him literally on a silver platter.
Yeah.
But, where you come from has a massive impact on how far you succeed in life. But bringing it back to Cockneys, what about Cockneys today? Like, I'm hesitant and use the word diaspora. It's like tongue-in-cheek, but in terms of being a Cockney, as we've said, it's now actually it's impossible to be a Cockney because there's no hospital in the sound of the current Bow Bells. But obviously the legacy of the population of the East End, their families have grown up, they've moved on, large parts of them are now in Essex and Kent. There's an article written in 2010 by Professor Paul Kurzweil of the University of York, who estimated that the Cockney accent would actually disappear from London within 30 years because of the transition away from obviously Cockney people and because of just natural changes to London and the language. Yeah. He argued it would be replaced by a mixture of Cockney, Bangladeshi and West Indian accents to create a multicultural London English.
I think when you get something like London, which is historically a real kind of, mixing pot of people from different cultures and parts of the world coming together, you're always going to see people bring their own influence with it, and that changes the community. I mean, then when we see areas like Essex and Kent and Hampshire, where traditionally Cockney people have moved out to, and they've brought their accent with them, and it's kind of merged with the local, and you've ended up with this thing called estuary English, which is this sort of hybrid between the RP that you would normally get in the southeast of England and Cockney in London, and bits of other people from around the world have brought their own bits of influence.
I think that's it, exactly right. I think that the trouble is divvying up the Cockney slang language, which developed from this community of people, to looking at whether that community still exists. And in all honesty, they probably don't still exist. But the remnants and the development of their families exist in other communities or similar communities that have sprung from them.
We've had a good old rabbit about Cockney rhyming slang.
Yes, we have, and I'm afraid we're running out of Harry Lime. So, before we have to say alligator, shall we move on?
Shall we move on? Shall we? Have you got a Cockney rhyming slang for interesting fact?
Lacking tact.
Lacking tact.
Yes, so we might know about the people known as the Pearly Kings and Queens. In 1875, there was a man called Henry Croft, and he established the Pearly Organisation, which was essentially a charity aimed at helping poorer members of the community. And he was basically a street sweeper. He was an orphan himself, and he collected money while he worked. And also while he worked, he, in the process, collected any sort of loose objects, trinkets left on the floor. But over time, he would add them to his outfit, creating this sort of distinctive look. And he did this to attract more attention to him as he asked for donations while he worked, which led to the tradition of the Pearly Kings and Queens of London. These people that are selected by the organisation, and apparently there is one for each borough, and their aim is to sort of raise awareness of the organisation and the charity. So there is a Pearly King and Queen, as I said, for each London borough and the City of London. And to this day, each one of them make their own outfits.
Yeah, and they're still collecting money for good causes, are they?
Yes, they are. Mostly around charitable things relating to homelessness and orphans. And
See, that's a nice note to end on.
what about yourself? Did you? I mean, there were thousands of interesting facts.
Mine's not quite so heartwarming, but I thought it was interesting.
Maybe I should have gone
at least.
last.
So there's a phrase that is in common usage, donkey's years. So he's been around for donkey's years. You know this one?
No.
We've been sat here for donkey's years.
I do feel that, though.
Yeah, donkey's years, which does come from Cockney rhyming slang. But the rhyming slang for years is not donkey's years, because that makes no sense. It's actually donkey's ears. So we've been here for donkey's ears. But over time, those words get slurred slightly into donkey's years. And also people will say we've been here for donkeys. But yeah, when you say donkey's years, that's something that's been corrupted over time. It should be donkey's ears.
So is donkey's ears meant to reflect years anyway?
Yeah, donkey's ears rhymes with years. But over time, people have missaid it as donkey's years, which has completely negated the whole point in saying it in the first place.
Brilliant. And was it called donkey? Because they're quite long, donkey's
Yeah,
years.
quite long, aren't they?
So is that why? Okay.
And I guess it's another thing, is somebody was thinking of what rhymes with years. Oh, look, some donkey's ears. That's it. That's our episode on Cockneys and Cockney rhyming slang and the very colourful, vibrant culture which evolved around them. So with that, we can say thank you for listening.
Thank you for earwigging.
Is that another one? Earwigging?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for listening. Please do remember to subscribe and follow us. We're in all the usual places. We're also you can email us if you like. We're info@thegallimaufry.show or contact us on social media. But with that, I say thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Oh, and here's the clue for the next episode.